If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting in front of a group of strangers, spilling the story of how my marriage fell apart, I would have laughed you right out of the room. Back then, I thought I had life completely figured out. I had a beautiful wife, a little boy who proudly called me dad, and a house straight out of a holiday postcard. It was the American dream, or so I thought. Emma and I met in college. She was everything. Sharp, hilarious, and had this quirky way of tilting her head when she laughed that could make the rest of the world fade away. I was hooked. Hard. And for a while, I thought she was just as into me. We got married a few years after graduation. It wasn't some extravagant Pinterest-worthy event. Just family, close friends, and enough cheap champagne to keep everyone buzzed. It was perfect. Or at least it felt that way. Then came Logan, our son. I swear, the moment I held him, my heart stretched beyond what I thought was possible. He was my partner in crime, my shadow. Life couldn't have been better. But funny thing about life, it loves a good curveball. Just when you think you've got your footing, it sends you tumbling. The cracks started showing when Emma told me she was pregnant again. At first, I was over the moon. Another kid? A sibling for Logan? Sign me up. But looking back now, I remember something was off. Her voice had this nervous edge to it. I figured it was hormones or exhaustion. She was growing a whole human, after all. Who wouldn't be a little frazzled? But the signs kept piling up. Late nights at work. Whispered phone calls she claimed were to her mom. Her sudden obsession with keeping her phone locked. I told myself I was imagining things. Emma would never cheat. She wasn't that kind of person, right? Looking back, I might as well have been wearing blinders. I've never been the jealous type, but even I couldn't ignore the shift in her behavior. She was distant, distracted, and honestly, terrible at hiding it. One night, she said she had a work dinner. No big deal. But for some reason, I checked her location on Find My iPhone. She wasn't anywhere near the restaurant she'd mentioned. Instead, she was parked outside some random house across town. When she got home, I asked, oh so casually, how was the dinner? She froze, just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. It was fine, she said, breezing past me to drop her purse on the counter. Her tone was way too rehearsed. Something wasn't adding up, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her. What if I was wrong? What if I was about to blow up my whole life over nothing? A week later, I found an old photo while rummaging through a kitchen drawer. Emma was in it, cozy with some guy I'd never seen before. Too cozy. When I asked her about it, she waved it off. Oh, that's Mark, she said, laughing. We dated in college. Nothing serious. I raised an eyebrow. You're practically sitting in his lap. She rolled her eyes. Jeremy, come on. It was years ago. Let it go. So I let it go. Or at least I pretended to. But the doubt? That stuck around, whispering in my ear every chance it got. The breaking point came a few months later. Logan had a mild bug, so we took him to the pediatrician. During the visit, the doctor casually mentioned his blood type. AB. Now, I'm no geneticist, but even I know that you don't get an AB kid from an O dad and an A mom. It's basic biology. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The doctor nodded, completely unaware she'd just set my entire life on fire. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline. When we got back, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Emma, I said, cornering her in the kitchen. We need to talk. She looked up from her phone, startled. What's wrong? What's Logan's blood type? I asked. Her face went pale. I don't remember. It's AB, I said, my voice sharper now. Explain to me how that's possible. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in our entire marriage, Emma was completely silent. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an escape. Molly, I said, my tone cutting through the thick silence. Say something. She shook her head, her lips trembling. I don't know what to say. I laughed bitterly. How about the truth? How about telling me whose kid I've been raising for the last 5 years? Jeremy, stop, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I snapped. You cheated, didn't you? You've been lying to me this whole time. She took a shaky step forward, but I threw up a hand to stop her. Don't you dare. Don't even try to hug me right now, I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. For a moment, Emma looked like she might finally tell the truth. But then, classic Emma, she pivoted to what she did best: damage control. "Jeremy, it was a mistake," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It happened once. I swear. It didn't mean anything." I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. "Once," I said, my stomach twisting. "You're telling me this happened once, and that's how we ended up with Logan? Do you think I'm stupid, Emma?" That's when the floodgates opened. She started sobbing, full-on, chest-heaving tears. "I didn't know how to tell you," she cried. I thought it didn't matter. You love him. He loves you. You're his dad." Her words hit me like a sucker punch. I did love Logan. He was my little guy, the kid who used to fall asleep on my chest, who lit up every time I walked into the room. But now, every one of those memories felt like they'd been rewritten, tainted by lies. "I'm not his dad," I said, my voice low and unyielding. "His real dad is out there somewhere. And you just decided to let me play the role because it was convenient." She flinched like I'd slapped her. But I didn't care. I was done tiptoeing around her guilt. Things only spiraled from there. Emma cried, begged, and swore up and down that the baby she was carrying was mine. But how could I believe her? Her words felt like smoke, slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to hold on. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, the silence between us thicker than concrete, I finally broke it. "I need proof," I said, my tone calm but firm. "Not just for the baby, for Logan too." Her head snapped up, her eyes already brimming with tears. "Jeremy, no," she pleaded. "You don't need a test. You're his father. You've always been his father." "Am I?" I shot back, leaning forward. "Because the last time we talked about this, you told me Logan wasn't mine." "That's not what I meant," she cried, her voice cracking. "I only said that because you were pressuring me. I didn't mean it. I was overwhelmed, Jeremy. I was pregnant, hormonal, and you were yelling at me. Don't you dare put this on me," I said, my anger bubbling over. "You're telling me you just made it up? That you lied about the biggest betrayal in our marriage?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't lie. I wasn't thinking straight. You have to believe me. Logan is yours. The baby is yours. They're both yours." But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. Her eyes, her voice, the way she twisted every word. It all felt like a carefully rehearsed act. I had fallen for it before, but not this time. Without another word, I stood up, walked over to Logan, and scooped him into my arms. "Where are you going?" Emma asked, her voice panicked as she scrambled to her feet. "To get some answers," I said, grabbing my car keys. "Jeremy, please," she cried, trailing me to the door. "You don't need to do this. You're overreacting." But I didn't stop. I buckled Logan into his car seat, started the engine, and drove straight to the nearest DNA testing lab. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Emma, but I ignored every single one. 2 weeks later, the results came in. I sat alone in my car outside the lab, staring at the envelope. It felt heavier than it should, like it was packed with lead instead of paper. My hands were clammy. My chest felt tight, like it was about to cave in. Finally, I ripped it open. Probability of paternity, 0%. There it was in black and white. I'd known this was coming, but seeing the words spelled out was like a punch to the throat. The world felt like it had tilted on its axis. My family, my life, it was all built on a lie. When I got home, Emma was waiting in the living room. She shot to her feet the second I walked in, her face a mix of dread and desperate hope. "Well?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't say a word. I pulled the papers from my jacket and threw them onto the coffee table. They fluttered to a stop, the bold text glaring up at her like a neon sign. She froze, her eyes scanning the page. And then she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she crumpled onto the couch, clutching the paper like it might somehow rewrite itself. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How could this happen? Jeremy, I swear, I don't know how. I don't even remember." "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Just stop, Emma. I'm done listening to your excuses." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I'm not making excuses. Yes, I made a mistake, but I can't even remember where or when. I don't know. Jeremy, you have to believe me. I never meant for this to happen." "You don't know?" You can't remember? I said, my voice rising. Emma, you cheated on me, lied to me for years, and now you're sitting here, acting like you don't even know who you were with? That's rich. Real rich. She sobbed harder, her hands gripping her hair like she was trying to hold herself together. But I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. Jeremy, please, Emma pleaded, her voice cracking. You have to understand, Logan is our son. He might not be your blood, but he's yours in every way that matters. And the baby. Don't, I said sharply, holding up a hand to stop her. Don't you dare talk to me about the baby. Because now I don't believe that child is mine either. Her sobs turned into gasps, like she couldn't catch her breath. No, Jeremy, the baby is yours, I swear. I know it's yours. I let out a bitter laugh, dripping with sarcasm. Oh, really? And how exactly do you know that, Emma? The same way you knew Logan was mine? Forgive me if I'm not lining up to buy what you're selling. She shook her head frantically, her voice climbing higher with desperation. This is different, Jeremy. I haven't. There hasn't been anyone else. I swear it. Another bitter laugh escaped me. That's exactly what you said about Logan, and look how that turned out. I'm telling you the truth this time, she sobbed. Please, Jeremy, believe me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not after everything. No, Emma, I said, my tone flat and resolute. The only thing I believe is that I can't trust you. Not now, not ever. Her face crumpled as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks, but I didn't let her interrupt. I'm getting a DNA test for this baby, too, I said firmly. And before you start? Yes. I know I'll have to wait until it's born. Fine. I'll wait. But let me be very clear. My name isn't going on that birth certificate until I see proof. If the test says the baby's mine, we'll talk. Until then, my answer is no. Emma looked like I'd just ripped her heart out. You can't be serious, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Oh, I'm dead serious. I shot back, crossing my arms. And just so we're clear, I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. I need to protect myself from whatever mess this turns into. Because if you think I'm going to let you, or anyone else, drag me through the mud, you've got another thing coming. That's when she completely lost it. Emma's sobs morphed into hysteria. She started pacing the room, yanking at her hair, her words tumbling out in a frantic, breathless stream. Then she stopped, spinning toward me with wild, desperate eyes. Jeremy, you can't do this, she screamed. You're tearing this family apart. What about Logan? What about the baby? What about us? There is no us, Emma, I said coldly. Not anymore. Her face twisted with panic. Please. I'll do anything, Jeremy. Anything. Just don't do this. I shook my head, my voice steady and unyielding. The time for anything was years ago, Emma. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. She collapsed onto the couch, her sobs echoing through the room like the dying notes of a bad song I never wanted to hear again. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman I thought I knew unravel before my eyes. A part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, her cries trailing behind me like ghostly whispers in the wind. The lawyer's office was nothing like I'd imagined. I expected sleek decor, intimidating furniture, something straight out of a courtroom drama. Instead, it was a modest space with a few bookshelves, a couple of diplomas, and a desk that looked like it had seen one too many broken families. Behind the desk sat Peter Marshall, a man in his mid-50s who looked as tired as the wood grain under his elbows. After I laid out my story, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he considered my words. So, let me get this straight, he said, his tone even. Your wife, Emma, admitted that your first child, Logan, isn't biologically yours. And now you're questioning the paternity of her second pregnancy as well. Correct? Yeah, I said, the frustration weighing heavy in my voice. I've only done a DNA test for Logan. It's confirmed. I'm not his father. But now Emma's claiming this new baby is mine, and honestly, I don't believe a word she says. Peter nodded, his expression neutral. Unfortunately, Jeremy, the legal side of this is complicated. My stomach sank. What do you mean? He let out a slow sigh, leaning forward. Let's start with Logan. In our state, if you're married at the time of a child's birth, the law presumes you're the legal father, regardless of biology. On top of that, You've acted as his father for 5 years. You've provided for him, raised him, and established a parental relationship. Legally, you're on the hook. I felt like I'd just been punched in the gut. You're telling me I'm stuck paying child support for a kid who isn't even mine? Peter nodded slowly, his face apologetic. I'm afraid so. We can push for reduced child support based on your financial situation or other factors, but getting out of it entirely? That's nearly impossible. I leaned back in my chair, dragging my hands over my face. This is insane, I muttered. She lies, she cheats, and I'm the one who gets punished? Peter sighed again. I know it feels unfair. Frankly, it is unfair. But that's the system we're dealing with. He paused for a moment, then leaned in, his tone shifting slightly. Now about the baby. Here, you might have a better shot. My head snapped up, clinging to that shred of hope. How? Well, Peter said, choosing his words carefully. We can file a motion to establish your doubts about paternity before the baby is born. That way, when the child arrives, there would already be a record of your concerns, Peter explained, his tone steady but serious. This could protect you from being automatically listed as the legal father on the birth certificate. Once the baby is born, we'd request a DNA test to confirm paternity. If the test shows you're not the father, you wouldn't have any financial or legal responsibility. I nodded, my mind spinning like a hamster wheel. And if the test shows I am the father? Peter's face didn't flinch. Then you'd be responsible, he said matter-of-factly. But at least you'd have clarity. Right now, the goal is to protect you from getting legally tied to this child, if it isn't yours. I exhaled slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a boulder. So let me get this straight, I said, trying to steady my voice. I'm screwed with Logan, but I got a shot at not getting roped into this with the baby? Peter gave me a grim smile. Pretty much. But even with Logan, we'll fight for the lowest possible child support. You don't have to accept the first number they throw at you. I sat back, staring at the papers on his desk. This wasn't what I wanted. Hell, it wasn't even close to fair. But what choice did I have? Emma had backed me into a corner, and now I had to fight my way out. Start the process, I said finally, my voice flat but resolute. File whatever needs filing. Let's get this thing moving. Peter nodded firmly. All right, I'll handle the paperwork. Just so you know, Jeremy, this is going to be a long and probably ugly process. Are you ready for that? Do I have a choice? I muttered, standing up. Let's just get it over with. As I left his office, it felt like I just signed up for a war I wasn't sure I could win. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going down without a fight. Living with Emma after everything came out was like tiptoeing through a minefield. Every day was a delicate balance between keeping the peace and holding on to my sanity. I couldn't just pack up and leave. Not yet. Peter had made it clear that if I abandoned her outright, it could backfire in court. So I stayed. I paid the bills, and I gritted my teeth through every excruciating moment. Emma, for her part, acted like we were still living the dream. Some days, she'd sit at the kitchen table with a steaming mug of tea, flipping through baby-name books like we were still a happy couple planning our future. Other days, she'd completely unravel, sobbing, pacing the house, and swearing on everything sacred that I was the father of both Logan and the baby. You're being paranoid, Jeremy, she'd say, her voice trembling with desperation. Logan is your son. The baby is yours. You're just letting all this legal stuff mess with your head. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But every time I looked at Logan, all I could see were those DNA results. And every time she brought up the baby, the cracks in my trust grew wider. Some nights, I'd hit my breaking point. I'd pack a bag and tell her I needed space. Sometimes I'd crash at a friend's place. Other times, I'd check into a cheap motel, staring at the stained ceiling and trying to figure out how my life had spiraled so far off course. The silence in those motel rooms was a relief, but it never lasted. Inevitably, my phone would start buzzing with texts and calls from Emma, begging me to come home. One night, after weeks of simmering frustration, I decided I couldn't keep avoiding the confrontation. I needed answers. Real answers. Who's Logan's father, Emma? I asked, my voice calm but unyielding. And don't give me that I don't know crap. I deserve the truth. She looked up from her tea, her wide eyes darting to the side like a cornered animal. I told you, Jeremy, she stammered. I don't remember. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I leaned forward, the edge in my voice sharp enough to cut glass. You don't remember? You don't remember sleeping with someone else? And having a kid? How convenient. Her face hardened. I was stressed, okay? I don't even know if it was just one time or more. I don't know. I rubbed my temples, trying to keep my patience in check. And the baby? I asked, my tone dropping. Are you going to tell me you don't know about this one, either? She slammed her mug down on the table, the tea sloshing over the edge. The baby is yours, Jeremy, she shouted, her voice shaking with rage and panic. I swear to God, it's yours. Oh, really? I shot back, crossing my arms. And how do you know that, Emma? You said the same thing about Logan. So what's your scientific proof this time? Her answers became more absurd with every passing second. She blamed stress, hormones, even some bizarre nonsense about how a woman's body just knows who the right father is. It was like talking to a brick wall, and the more she twisted her words, the angrier I got. I can't do this, I said finally, standing up. I can't sit here and listen to you lie to my face anymore. Emma followed me as I headed for the door, her voice rising in desperation. Where are you going? She cried, tears streaming down her face. To clear my head, I said without looking back. Don't wait up. The next few months dragged on like a slow-motion train wreck. Every day was a countdown, not to the baby's arrival out of joy, but because it meant the DNA test was finally within reach. Every interaction with Emma felt like navigating a battlefield, each conversation a fresh wound. The waiting was almost over. As soon as the baby was born, I could finally demand the DNA test and let the courts start untangling this nightmare. When the day came, it felt surreal. Emma went into labor in the dead of night, and I drove her to the hospital, my emotions tangled in knots. Exhaustion, dread, resignation. She gave birth to a baby girl, a tiny, beautiful thing with a full head of dark hair. I stood in the corner of the delivery room, watching as the nurses cleaned her up. For a moment, just a flicker, I felt something. Hope, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it came. Emma looked up at me, cradling the baby in her arms, her eyes shimmering with tears. Jeremy, she said softly. She's ours. She's yours. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, pulling my phone from my pocket. Stepping into the hallway, I dialed Peter's number. It's time, I said. Emma had known this storm was coming for months. Peter and I had filed a motion long before the baby was born, challenging the paternity of her pregnancy and kicking off divorce proceedings. She pretended it didn't faze her, walking around the house with her head held high, putting on a performance of defiance. But I saw through it. Late at night, I'd hear her in the next room, whispering into the phone with someone, her voice thick with worry. It didn't take long to figure out what she was up to. She'd hired her own lawyer, sharp, expensive, and ruthless. This wasn't just going to be a battle. It was going to be an all-out war. When the baby was born, the DNA test confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't her father. That should have been it, the final chapter in this exhausting saga. But no, this was only the beginning of the circus. The courts didn't care about betrayal. They didn't care about the lies, the broken trust, or the fact that my entire life had been upended. All they cared about were the logistics, money, assets, and who would take care of the kids. And Emma? She had no shame. She was ready to play the system for everything she could squeeze out of it. The court proceedings were brutal. Peter had warned me they would be, but nothing could have prepared me for how absurd it all was. Emma's lawyer wasted no time painting her as the victim, the poor, vulnerable woman who'd been unjustly vilified by her controlling and paranoid husband. He's been emotionally manipulative, her lawyer declared, gesturing toward me as if I were the villain in some twisted soap opera. Emma has spent years trying to hold this marriage together, despite being subjected to baseless accusations and threats of divorce. I almost laughed out loud. Baseless accusations? The DNA results were sitting right there, clear as day. But her lawyer waved them off like an annoying fly, barely worth addressing. Instead, he leaned hard into a narrative about Emma as a tragic figure, a woman pushed to her emotional limits by a cold and unfeeling husband. She's not perfect, the lawyer said, his tone soft and understanding, like he was talking about a minor mistake instead of years of deceit. But who among us is? She's a mother, Your Honor. A loving, dedicated mother who only wants what's best for her children. Meanwhile, Emma sat there, nodding along like she was the tragic hero of the story, soaking up every word like a sponge. When asked about the DNA results, she shrugged, as if they were nothing more than an unfortunate coincidence. I never meant to hurt Jeremy, she said, her voice trembling with carefully rehearsed sincerity. I don't even know how this happened. I just want to move forward for the sake of our kids. It was maddening, infuriating, but Peter had warned me to keep my cool. Let them dig their own hole, he'd said. The facts are on our side. The final rulings were a mixed bag. The court acknowledged the DNA test for the newborn, officially ruling that I wasn't her father. That meant I dodged a lifetime of child support for a child that wasn't mine. One small victory in a mountain of losses. I should have known it wouldn't end cleanly. When it came to Logan, the courts didn't care about DNA. Despite the results, the judge declared me his legal father. Peter had warned me this might happen, but hearing it out loud still felt like a gut punch. It comes down to one thing, Jeremy, Peter explained. You've been Logan's dad in every practical sense for 5 years. You've raised him, provided for him, and built a bond that, at least in the eyes of the court, outweighs biology. The judge had looked at me with a kind of rehearsed sympathy I didn't ask for. You're still his father, Mr. James, she said, her tone soft. And he deserves your continued support. That word, support, took on a whole new meaning once the financial battle began. Emma's lawyer didn't hold back, painting her as a struggling single mom with 2 young kids, one of whom needed special therapy and schooling. Meanwhile, I was this stable professional with a steady income and a future to build. It didn't matter that Emma had shattered my life into 1,000 pieces. I was still expected to foot the bill. The division of assets was just as brutal. Emma got the house, the bulk of our savings, and most of our joint possessions. I got my car, my personal savings, and a mountain of resentment. But the worst blow? The child support. The court slapped me with one of the highest percentages they could legally impose. At first, it felt like half my paycheck vanished every month. Watching my hard-earned money flow directly into Emma's account, knowing she'd use it to maintain the comfortable life she'd built on lies, was like swallowing glass. But Peter wasn't one to back down. Over the years, we filed motion after motion, presenting evidence of my financial strain and chipping away at the initial ruling. Bit by bit, we brought the payments down to the minimum allowed by law. It wasn't a big win, but it was something. For the first time in years, I could breathe again. Those years were some of the darkest of my life. I lost so much, my marriage, my trust in people, my financial stability, but there was one thing I didn't lose, my freedom. And that was worth every fight. Looking back, I still can't believe I survived it all. The court battles, the lies, the constant strain. It felt like an avalanche that would never end. But life has a way of surprising you. After everything, I came out stronger, wiser, and dare I say, happier. For starters, I got my finances back on track. Sure, I'm still paying child support for Logan, but it's manageable now. I barely even think about it anymore. My business has taken off, and I'm doing better than ever. But the real plot twist? My love life. After the divorce, I threw myself into dating, not out of desperation, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to enjoy someone's company again. Let me tell you, dating in your 30s is a whole different beast. Every date felt like an interview, and the same question always came up. So, you're divorced? What happened? I got pretty good at giving the short version. She cheated. I left. The end. It wasn't always smooth sailing. A few relationships fizzled out. One woman asked me about marriage on our second date. You know what I did? I smiled, paid the check, and never called her again. Marriage had become a 4-letter word for me. Hearing it made my fight-or-flight instincts kick in, usually flight. Then I met Kate. Kate wasn't like anyone else I'd dated. For starters, she didn't care about the whole divorce with baggage thing. She found my sarcasm hilarious, and her wit was sharp enough to keep me on my toes. She had her own complicated past, so there was no judgment between us. We understood each other in a way that felt effortless. We've been together for a few years now. We're not married, And that's exactly how we like it. We live together, split the bills, and argue over whose turn it is to take out the trash. But the word marriage, it hasn't come up once, and not because we're avoiding it. We just don't need it. Kate likes to joke that I'm allergic to paperwork, and honestly, she's not wrong. But the truth is, I've learned something through all this. Love isn't about contracts or ceremonies. It's about trust, respect, and showing up for each other every single day. Kate doesn't need a piece of paper to prove she loves me, and I don't need one to prove I love her. Life isn't perfect. It never is, but it's pretty damn good. I've got my freedom, my sanity, and a partner who makes me laugh every single day. Sure, I still roll my eyes whenever someone mentions the word marriage, but at least now I can laugh about it too. The way I see it, I've already done my time in the trenches of bad relationships. I've been lied to, cheated on, and dragged through hell. And yet here I am alive, kicking, and maybe even thriving. If that's not a win, I don't know what is. To anyone out there facing their own version of my story, here's my advice. Life gets better. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but you'll get there. And when you do, you'll realize that freedom and happiness are worth every fight. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.